At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Sacramento has an abundance of nonprofits that serve every aspect of the human condition. Local charities have been caught between the greater demands for their services during this recession and reduced giving within the region. Give Local Now is a regional effort created to raise the level of philanthropy within the region and enlist more of us in contributing to the charities that, among other things, feed, clothe, shelter, and entertain us. Joining us today to understand the state of philanthropy in our region is fundraising executive Ann Lucas, philanthropist and Stonebridge Property CEO Randy Sater, and consultant for the Give Local Now project Susan Frazier. Welcome all to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Given the difficult economic climate that we're in right now and the lack of money that families have just to spend on basic necessity, why launch this project at this point in time?
You know, we felt that there couldn't actually be a better time than to launch it now.
Really?
I mean, charities need money now more than ever. Giving since the recession started has been down about 17% overall. It's bounced back a little bit now, but it's still down 11% over what it was in 2007. And with government cutbacks, nonprofit organizations are seeing decreased income from government sources and increased demand. So we felt that there couldn't be a better time to start it.
And what are you all, in the process of discovering this project, what are you all learning about this region that we didn't know before?
Well, personally, I have learned, which was a surprise to me, that there are more people that could be tapped for giving. The circles that I operated in before included people like yourself, people like Randy, that have very visible positions and very, very, very generous, a lot of giving. So I thought, everybody's tapped. There's no place else to go, and I have discovered that there are untapped resources in this region.
Well, you know, Randy, the conventional wisdom is that we have no headquarters corporation of any size here. Actually, we have a few, okay?
That's right.
Of size, but we have such a small handful and such a small number of wealthy individuals that there just isn't any more room for giving in this region. What do you think, as a person who has been an active philanthropist and works for an organization affiliated with one of the most generous corporations in this region?
Well, that's a good question. I think, it all starts from a perspective inviting people to the table to have a conversation about philanthropy. I think one of the things I learned very early on growing up is something that my mom used to teach us, which is a little bit is enough if enough people do it. And if you start from that premise, there's a lot of folks within the region. This is a region of 2.8 million people. And if we can just encourage a broader scope of people along with the philanthropy that is already happening, the great philanthropy by the corporate entities and within this region, if we invite others to the table to give as well, then I think we can accomplish and expand the amount of giving in the region.
What's some of the conventional wisdom that this initiative is sort of puncturing, deflating? Where it is that we're getting smarter about where philanthropy happens and how it can happen more?
Well, I think that a lot of that is around that, pretty much what Randy said is there are a lot of people that are out there that are untapped, and we have to work a little harder to identify who they are.
What are the statistics?
Well, the statistics, for example, in households with income, now these are high-income households, with households of income of $100,000 or more, on average, it's about $700 less a year that those households give than the national average. If you bump that up and look at household incomes of $200,000 or more, it's almost $7,000 difference in how much they give a year. So I don't like to use the word, bring us up to average exactly, or I don't like to use that phrase exactly, but if we did, it would be about $250 million in the region every year.
We're like Woebegone. everything's above average about us, correct?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And if we were able to raise that extra $250 million a year, what do you think that would mean to the charitable sector in our community?
Well, that's one of the things that we want to try to find out with this project, because we don't want that to come from a couple of people with ideas, and we actually don't even really want it to come from the nonprofits. We'd like it to come from the community at large. And so one of the things that we're doing as part of our initiative is to have a big social media campaign at some point in next year that asks the question, here's your Give Local Now bucks. If you have $250 million, how would you spend them? And what outcomes would you want from that? What would you like to see? And we'd like that to come from literally thousands of people, and we'll collate that into a vision for what the region could look like as one of our strategies to try to change the culture of giving in this region. We want to be inspiring.
Well, you know, when you talk about changing the culture of giving, Randy, you have an interesting perspective on this, because many of us default and think of philanthropy as only dollars and cents.
Right.
But you don't think that goes far enough. Can you share with us sort of your perspective on this?
Yeah, in 2010, when I was chair of the Sacramento Metro Chamber, we started an effort at the Chamber called Project Inspire. And in that effort, what we tried to do was really merge this concept of community-minded leadership, community-minded volunteerism, and community-minded philanthropy. And we created a variety of different programs. One of those programs in particular created volunteer opportunities where members of the Chamber and the business community can show up for a turnkey opportunity to volunteer in the community. Everything's taken care of. All they have to do is show up and put in the hours. Coupled with that was our Inspire Giving program, whereby we asked people to contribute a membership, $250 or $1,000, one-time contribution, and it really was nothing more than a giving circle. So as a giving circle at the end of each year, we asked the nonprofit community to come in and apply for grants. We make one grant a year. Last year we gave $10,000 to Soil-Borne Farms, and the year prior to that we gave $10,000 to River City Food Bank. What's really cool about the whole program is that in addition to the $10,000 grant that we made to River City Food Bank, we then attracted in-kind contributions of $250,000
Wow.
from the business community, which really helped to reopen the River City Food Bank after the original was destroyed by fire. The same thing is going on this year with Soil-Borne Farms. In addition to the $10,000 grant, the Leadership Sacramento class of the Metro Chamber is actively creating a whole new outdoor learning center for them. And that program to date is up around $150,000 in contributions.
Step back for 1 second, though, and deconstruct the cash giving
Yes.
from the in-kind and volunteer time. Why is the volunteer time so important, especially with engaging people?
I think the volunteer time is so important because in many ways it's easy to write a check. I think where people become engaged with an organization is by volunteering their time to that organization. And I think what I've seen over the years is once you make that commitment to volunteer time for an organization, then you're making that commitment to also over time maybe step into a leadership role with that organization as well, and opportunities on their board of directors, and really kind of changing the whole dynamic of the organization. And that's what it takes, I think.
Well, I want to focus on this for a second, because there is sometimes people feel somewhat unempowered because they don't feel that they're wealthy enough necessarily. Well, yeah, I could give, but what is my $25 going to matter, something like that. And I do wonder, Ann, does that sort of mindset or that kind of conclusion that people reach at times kind of cut off particularly young people from starting to get involved earlier in philanthropy?
I think it can, and I think it's the nonprofit's job to do, to make sure that they know that every gift is valuable and that your gift of time is valuable as well. That said, not all nonprofits are set up to take volunteers in the way, especially the way that you were talking about with the kind of large scale influx of people for Project Inspire. So there are many different ways to get involved, but the nonprofits themselves really need to be able to articulate exactly how that fits in with their mission and how they can use volunteers in a good way.
Susan, how do we democratize essentially the spirit of giving in this community?
Well, again, we've thought a lot about this with the Give Local Now project, and we have a couple of different options with it. And one of them that I'm excited about is to create a crowdsourcing tool that can be on the Give Local Now website.
Definition of crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing would be that, let's say, nonprofit X needs coffee cups. And so they put up their need for coffee cups. We need 100 coffee cups. And you can go onto the site and say, oh, I'd like to contribute $10 towards those coffee cups. And if it follows the model that's out there that's very successful for funding artistic projects, like it is called Kickstarter, it's a crowdsourcing model that people might be familiar with. It's sort of the model I have in my head for this. You don't actually get charged until all the coffee cups are bought. And so essentially it's a group of people coming together to fund a tangible need for a nonprofit. So they can contribute $5, they can contribute $500, but they're all contributing towards one thing, and they all become part of a crowd that makes something happen. And so it's a way to engage a lot of people.
How do we change or shift the behavior of people? Ann has a partner who comes in to my foundation with Ann to train my Emerging Leaders program on volunteer service. And Patrick says, I can tell who you are by looking at your calendar and your checkbook. That tells me what your priorities are. Yeah. And I've always thought that that was a very profound statement. Typically, the spirit of giving is within all of us. How do we get more of that calendar and more of that time in changing behavior so that way people feel connected, at least they know where to plug in?
Right. So my personal experience with this, the first time that I ever tried being a part of the community, volunteering, giving of my own, at the time, very limited funds, was that it made me feel wealthy. You know, I didn't have a lot of wealth, but I
Tell
felt
us more about that.
Well, I felt wealthier because I was sharing what I had. And so it was really powerful. It was a very powerful feeling. So the reason that I'm attracted to this project is that I think that all you have to do is give people a taste. And there's so many great things happening in this region. So raising regional pride around the good things that are happening. Project Inspire. El Dorado County has at least 5 really wonderful initiatives that are going on that the rest of the region doesn't know about. There's just a lot of really, really good stuff happening. There's amazing stuff happening with youth.
Like what?
A group called Reason to Party, where they pick a cause.
Reason to Party.
Reason to Party. They go out on social media, they pick a cause, and they have a party around it, and then all the funds go to the cause.
Wow.
And they're just doing that on their own. There's amazing young philanthropists in this region. So I think if we can leverage existing relationships, if we can say to the gal that's organizing Reason to Party, you know, who all do you know that you could perhaps give just to get them to try? Or those high wealth people, if we can get the ones that do to bring in a few that don't and say, just give it a try. I think they'll get that taste of that magic of feeling wealthier. Even no matter how much money you have, you can actually not feel wealthy. And so just that magic of feeling wealthier because you've shared.
But I think one of the keys to that is that it's people reaching out to other people.
Yes, that's the core strategy.
That is the core strategy behind whether you're talking about social media or whether you're talking about major gift funding.
Yes,
fundraising. It's peer-to-peer.
Yes, I agree.
Nonprofit organizations can do only so much with their own direct appeals, but when you have someone that is advocating for you as a nonprofit organization and asking their friends and family to join them in working with you or join you in donating, then that's really powerful. That's the most powerful thing that you can do to raise money.
Let's step back and start at the essential unit of society, which is the family. If we had all the parents in the region at this table with us right now, and hopefully they're all watching at this moment, what advice would all 3 of you give them in terms of turning on that charitable gene within our children?
Well, I think giving is a learned behavior. You know, we are taught at about 1 or 2 to begin sharing our toys, and it's tough at first, and we all get used to it.
Some of us get used
Well, some of
easier
us
than
do better
others.
than others, but nonetheless, I do think it's a learned behavior, and to have children participate with you, they do, they follow your lead. So as parents, we need to teach our children to be philanthropic as well. And there are many schools. It's been interesting in the last maybe 15 or 20 years. Service learning has become, very common in public and charter schools, and that's a pretty common thing now.
I think also, it would be wonderful to get a group of 5- and 6-year-olds in a room talking about volunteering, and I don't think there's anything more creative than a group of 5- to 6-year-olds. It seems that by the time we reach about 25 or 30, we start losing our creativity, and I think business, philanthropy, whatever we're talking about, one of the key things going forward is this whole notion of being creative and taking a creative look at how to do things differently. So it would be an interesting thing, I think, to really involve children in the whole concept early on and give them the opportunity to do philanthropy even at 5 and 6, collecting pennies and nickels and dimes, and actually volunteering as well. So it's kind of creating that whole culture early on that children come to be expected that that's something that they want to do.
Actually, you're giving me a wonderful idea.
What's
so,
that?
Well, we have a campaign that we're going to start again next year that's called I'm a Philanthropist, and social media campaign where we're going to highlight all kinds of different people that give, just to show the world that there's a broad spectrum of people that are engaged. Some people giving a lot, some people giving a little, some people giving their time. I want a 5-year-old.
5-year-old philanthropist.
A 5-year-old philanthropist.
I'm sure there's somebody out there.
That was one of the key things we learned when we did Project Inspire, is that when you wrote your check for $250, you were really writing a check for $260,000 to the River City Food Bank. There's no way that an individual, individual members in our organization would necessarily write a check for $260,000, but being part of that effort really enabled them to do something much bigger than themselves. And I think, just creating that notion and idea in the community is powerful.
You're raising an interesting thought, Randy. There was that book that turned into a documentary called Bowling Alone. Oh, yeah. And talked about the breakdown in American society, how we're all sort of sitting in front of our 500-channel TVs and never coming out of our homes. And it sounds like that philanthropy might be a channel to start to knit together and build community. That might be a cascading outcome.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating.
Absolutely.
In terms of what's next for this project and the region, where do you want to be, or where do you want this project to be, say 3 years from now?
So I'm going to say something that will sound strange, but I'd like it to be over. And what I mean by that is that
Now that's a consultant worth hiring. Put yourself out of a job?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like it to be so successful that it's over. And what I mean by that is that I don't want Give Local Now to be another layer of complication in the philanthropy scene. It's a very complicated scene as it is, and so I don't want it to be another thing that has to be funded, that has to be managed, that has to be where it divides people's attention. And so what I'm hoping to have happen is a couple of really concentrated years of changing the game. And so changing the culture, getting a lot of new people in place that are giving a lot of new tools in place that can be used by nonprofits, used by donors. And at the end of that, there's going to be some things that need to go forward to hand that back to the organizations that are most suited to carry that into the long term, so that the project itself may look like it's still going because, the Sacramento Region Community Foundation might be shepherding something into the future, or the Nonprofit Resource Center, or, whoever. It makes the most sense to take a piece of the project and own it off into the future. But I really think that Give Local Now should be thought of as a catalyst and something that can put a lot of energy into a couple of years and do a lot of things to try to change the game and then exit.
Is there a cause for there to be some sort of common infrastructure, though, within the region, so that
Yes.
that way some of the sort of disaggregation of resources and communications has some sort of hub, so to speak, so that information is readily available? And secondly, because of donor fatigue, that because of the multiplicity of organizations and the duplication that comes with that, that there starts to be some sort of rationalizing of what is the nonprofit environment?
Well, I think that could come in a couple of ways, but I don't know that it needs another layer, as Susan said, to accomplish that. I think that the Sacramento Region Community Foundation could do a piece of that, and is doing a piece of that now, as is the Nonprofit Resource Center, and I think that there may be those organizations could pick that up. But I would also say that as we begin to look at duplication, there certainly is in some cases, but I think there are a lot of holes as well. We have
Like what?
Well, I mean, I don't think you could look and say that that homelessness is solved in Sacramento. For
I don't
example,
think so.
It doesn't mean that there aren't many organizations working on the same problem, but it isn't solved yet. So I guess what I have been proposing is that we really map it all out, and we look at who's doing what, where are they doing it, where are the gaps, where is the overlap, and then where's the funding coming from, and then that's another base, research base to a conversation that we could have, both as collaborating as nonprofits, but also collaborating as funders.
Right.
Speaking of going back to the research that's been done, is there anything else in the research that surprised you in terms of either for the good or for the bad for the region?
We did both quantitative and qualitative research for the Give Local Now project, and I think the thing that surprised me the most in the qualitative research really was that there were so many donors that didn't feel like they knew what happened to their dollars. And I don't know whether that's because they weren't paying attention or whether the nonprofits weren't communicating that well. But it just, even as a small donation, it just doesn't feel good to give and then not know what happened. And I think that it may just be in the messaging as well. It may be that, it's not just, oh, I know I gave to help buy that coffee cup, but, but that's a so what. What did that coffee cup help the nonprofit do?
Right. And so as part of that, again, another big piece of Give Local Now is focused on the nonprofits, trying to get them better at stewardship and get their boards stronger.
And accountability?
And accountability. And so there's a group of people that offer training, different organizations, community foundations, Nonprofit Resource Center, American Fundraising Professionals. And under the banner of Give Local Now, they're all cooperating to coordinate their training and say, how can we move this forward? How can we really put everything that we have under one banner and actually make a bigger difference for the sector?
Yeah. Well, Randy, I want to ask you as a funder, what's important for you and how you evaluate nonprofits? What's the message that nonprofits you wish they do more of?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that question. We just had 60 nonprofits from throughout the region submit applications for the $10,000 grant for this year and the other contributions that will go along with that. And I have to tell you, there wasn't a bad application in the bunch.
Really?
I think the nonprofits are all doing remarkable work out there. They all are, many of which are operating on shoestring budgets, accomplishing incredible missions. To make a selection out of 60 down to 5 even was incredibly difficult, and we're in the process now of going out to the various members of the Inspire Giving Circle to make the selection for the grant recipient for next year, and it's very, very, very difficult. I think what's important going forward in terms of granting requests is look for ways that you can engage your funder or engage the employees of your funder or engage a broader demographic or a broader group of people with the region, not just taking a check, but how can you really create kind of a broader mission for what you want to accomplish with the dollars. I think those are the types of things that we're looking for, is how can you accomplish more with less dollars, more volunteer resources, or how can we expand the invitation of the people to the table to give to that organization?
And I hear the approach. I guess where I'm struggling is that, for instance, some of the organizations that help the homeless or that take care of the poorest and most vulnerable of our populations, a lot of times these are really ad hoc organizations that are doing some very heavy lifting with very few resources, and they don't have any infrastructure.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
And so Can you help us understand how we get from where they're at in just trying to give someone something to eat and being able to provide that level of interaction that Randy's describing?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, but I think that part of it has to do with, what we measure. And I think that as donors even, I mean, so many donors want to only give to program. They don't want to give to infrastructure. And the infrastructure, that's not very sexy, I'll agree with that. But at the same time, it has to happen or the rest of it falls apart. So I think that we ought to be looking more about outcomes. And, at the end of the day, what have you accomplished? That's really what I want to give to, is an organization that's really high performing and that has good outcomes.
Okay, and in our final few seconds, I want to ask all of you for a very brief answer to the following question. While we're not going to name individual charities, if there was one sector that you'd urge all of the residents of this region to give to, I'm putting you on the spot. Okay, you got to pick one. Okay, actually, I'll give you two.
You give me two?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
You got 10 seconds.
I've got 10 seconds. Well, I would say I have a passion for young children, and so I think that the investment that you put in
young children, what's the second?
Well, then I would say then older children. I would say children.
Okay, Randy?
It has to be children. It has to be health, well-being, and education of children, I think.
Okay, Susan, you have the final word.
I would
5 seconds.
I would echo youth in particular.
Okay. All right, and there you have it. Thank you all, and keep up the good work. We'll be interested to see the next iteration of the results.
All right.
And that's our show. Thanks to our guests, and thank you for watching. For Studio Sacramento, I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.